Listen to us on your smartphone and tablet. Download the NBC Sports Radio app. I'm Jeff Biggs. This is NBC Sports Radio.
Well, the Tennessee Volunteers have their man. All the transfer rules in the SEC a couple of weeks ago were changed, and the NCAA picked up on that yesterday as well. And Brandon Kennedy, formerly the backup center for the Alabama Crimson Tide, he was thinking about Tennessee, he was thinking about Auburn, but he's going to transfer, be eligible right away because he's a grad transfer, and be able to play 2 years for the Tennessee Volunteers. It's a step. It doesn't ensure a winning record. It doesn't ensure even 6-6. It's still a long way for Tennessee to go to get it. I'm speaking of the 6-6 record. But it's a start for the Tennessee Volunteers. Or should I say actually a step? I might suggest that the hiring of Jeremy Pruitt was a start. Hi everybody, I'm Marky Bilson, your voice of choice for a new generation of Tri-City sports fans. The name of the program, Tri-City Sports Now. We own the Tri-Cities on 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities, because I've got the best guests and the hardest hitting opinions in the marketplace. I'm the most outspoken member. All this. I was talking about Han Solo a lot. What about Juan Soto with the Reds, who sweep the Royals here this past week? He sweep this past week and such. Anyway, the big news came out just about an hour ago. Brandon Kennedy had been I prefer to say the backup center at Alabama. That's where he was at the depth chart. And I think that's more accurate than to say a 4-star lineman coming out of college. Maybe he will comprise a line with Trey Smith in Knoxville that'll be just aces. I mean, it's a possibility, but at the same time, you're getting the backup of Alabama, and that should be noted as well. How far it is now that you're, oh good, we get Alabama's backup. That's how far the Vols have fallen. Of course, Tennessee's lost to them 11 years in a row. Anyway, this is the opportunity to transfer a rival Southeastern Conference school. It's the opportunity that we saw last weekend. Alabama wanted to stop Kennedy from transferring in the conference. They shouldn't have that power. Shouldn't have it at all. Man transferred in December. And let me just ask you, let's say you say you studied medicine at ETSU. Okay? And you completed your initial coursework and you say, now I've just been accepted to transfer to Johns Hopkins. And I'm sorry, Brian Nolan, but that's just a little bit more prestigious than the ETSU medical department. They'll always have making grapefruit juice sweeter at ETSU, but Johns Hopkins, that's sort of the place you want to go if you're going to hold a scalpel for a living, Anyhow, the point that I'm trying to make here is that the Alabama Crimson Tide, and Nick Saban specifically, wanted to prevent Kennedy from transferring. We've talked about this before. Transferring in the conference. Oh, go ahead. Transfer to Washington. Go transfer to Rutgers. Go transfer someplace we're not going to play. But that's foolish. And I remember Phil Fulmer talking about, transfers, we don't want necessarily just somebody transferring because he's second string. Why not? Why not want to transfer to a place you can play? Isn't that what Joe Flacco did when he transferred from Pitt to Delaware? Didn't that give him a chance to be a pro football player and a Super Bowl winning quarterback? What about Brandon Stewart? Old Vol fans know who I'm talking about. Stewart was destined to be the backup to Peyton Manning. Came in the same class. Actually started to play at the same time a UCLA game. When Jerry Colquitt, there's a name from the past, was knocked out. His senior season ended in 3 plays, and that was his football career, basically. Got drafted, but didn't make the Panthers. He was drafted by the Carolina Panthers. Anyway, so Jeremy, what was he saying here? We had, it was going to be a new quarterback for Tennessee, somebody that was destined to be a backup before. And so against UCLA, as soon as, Colquitt went down, Phil Fulmer started playing everybody. He didn't care, let's see what Manning has. Let's see what Brandon Stewart has. Yes, I know that Todd Helton's the backup. Then Todd Helton hurt his shoulder. Decided, baseball, I like that. Hey, it was always in the cards for him to play baseball. And then Peyton Manning became the starting quarterback at Tennessee. Because you knew Brandon Stewart wasn't going to beat out Peyton Manning. So what happened to Brandon Stewart? This long story gets told here. Well, Brandon Stewart transfers to Texas A&M. And then in 1998, he has to sit out a year, his senior year. In the Big 12 championship game, Texas A&M beats an undefeated and top-ranked Kansas State squad for the Big 12 championship. Otherwise, it's not Florida State with the backup quarterback. It's Kansas State with a primo defense, and I believe Michael Bishop playing quarterback against Tennessee. I think Tennessee would have had a much more difficult time beating Kansas State for the national championship that year than Florida State with the backup quarterback. In fact, 2 years later, K-State defeated the Vols in the Cotton Bowl. Point is, Brandon Stewart transferred because he was going to be second string. And when he did it, he helped Tennessee win their national championship by slaying the dragon that they otherwise would have had to have slain. Could the Vols have done it? Possibly, but I'm sure that most Tennessee fans are just ecstatic with the way it worked out. Let's go put this on here. I wanted to point out, so Brandon Kennedy becomes a Vol. The transfer rule allows him to do so, although the SEC made it official. Nick Saban couldn't keep his tentacles on him any longer once he was a grad transfer. There is some talk that conferences may try to develop rules by themselves that say, no, you can't transfer within the conference. What did I just tell you there? I think that would be a bad rule. Oh, but he might come back and beat us. Yeah, he might also beat an opponent that would help you win a title. How do you know Brandon Kennedy won't spring the block for Tennessee to spring some sort of massive upset of Auburn this year? And that allows Alabama to win the SEC West this year over Auburn that otherwise they wouldn't be able to do. I mean, what's stopping that? Anyway, and again, don't call football players student athletes if you're going, though, to try in the future to prevent someone once they've graduated, or really a transfer anywhere, from transferring wherever they want to go. Used to be you had to give intent and ask permission by the team. Now what you're doing is that you just declare, and the team that you wish to transfer from has to basically notify the parties that be within 2 days. So you don't have the reserve clause of college football is now over. Still have to sit out a year unless you're going to be transferring something like from an FBS school to an FCS. So anyhow, the other rule that, of course, came out yesterday is red shirts. If you play 4 games or fewer, you could be redshirted. It used to be that you could only play, the first few games to get that red shirt. Now you can play whenever as long as it's 4 games. In fact, Quentin Dormady, interesting story here on allfortennessee.com, he might have been able to have saved a year of eligibility, as a matter of fact. Had he not, and certainly Will McBride could have last year, had these rules been in effect. Now, I know somebody's going to say, Markey, Dormady did play in 5 games. Yes, he did. Played a cup of coffee against South Carolina, and that was it. Other than that, he was held to 4 games. Yeah, if you kept out Dormady for whatever reason, you put in if you wanted to, say a walk-on or something to hand the ball off in that situation after he'd played his 4 games and had his injury, or you went with a Will McBride in that situation, it wouldn't have eaten up now his eligibility. Played in 2 games last year, late in the season. Yeah, it counts because the old rules were in effect. But if he did that this year, he could be redshirted, theoretically. But so you only have the 4 games. Play 4 games, it can be against Vanderbilt, it can be against ETSU, it can be against West Virginia in week 1, doesn't matter when the game is played, it can be the bowl game, and you can still be redshirted. That's a good rule. That's a good rule. But what I do see with these transfer rules, and this is talked about a lot, hey, if my coach leaves for greener pastures, I ought to be able to leave for greener pastures and not have to sit out a season. Sounds reasonable. It really does. Steve Forbes has been on this show, the ETSU head men's basketball coach, and says, he agrees you should be able to transfer once the coach leaves and not have to sit out a season. But I want to give you this scenario and tell me what's preventing this. Remember when Ed DeChellis left for Penn State back in 2003? Yeah, it was a little bit, they haven't contacted me. The next day it was in State College. Sure. He had the SID, the athletic department covering up for him for his trip to Penn State. But ETSU was a very good basketball team to come only a boneheaded decision by Tim Smith at the end of their NCAA tournament game against Wake Forest from winning in the NCAA tournament. There was also that Ryan Lawson turnover, but regardless, it was a very close game against Wake Forest with an opportunity to at least go to overtime at the end, if not win it outright with the right shot. And ETSU was a good team. It was certainly a turnkey team to go to the NCAA tournament the next year for whoever came in and coached it. Turned out to be Murray Bartow. But what if players were allowed at that time, 2003, to transfer wherever they wanted to go? What if they did that? Okay. And not fear reprisal, not fear having to sit out a year. In other words, DeChellis is going to Penn State. He took an assistant coach named Hillary Scott with him. What would have prevented him from taking Zakiwa Dude and Gerald Fields? Maybe even Brad Knuckles, who turned Clemson down for ETSU, with him to Penn State. Don't have to sit out a year. Can start competing right away in the Big Ten. It's a bigger conference, more exposure. Who knows what the future of those players might have been in pro basketball if Ed DeChellis was allowed to do that. But it would have left ETSU basketball in ruins. Absolute ruins. I mean, the next year after Wadud and Fields left, the team finishing dead last in the SoCon. All I'm saying here is that we're hearing a lot about transfers and such. I know there are going to be more changes on the way. It sounds good, especially after what we have now. No, teams should not be able to restrict a player from transferring wherever he wants to go. But then again, if you do take out that rule requiring him to sit out a year, what would have prevented a Fields and a Wadud and a Knuckles to have followed DeChellis to Penn State back in 2003? Maybe the player should have that right, as I said, but boy, it would have been really, really tough for ETSU. Consider the basketball program that they might have now. I mean, it could have had significant impact on where the basketball program is now. I am Marky Bilson. The name of the show is Tri-City Sports Now. I'm going to talk a little more football when we come back. But Brandon Kennedy is a Tennessee Volunteer. I'm Dirty, Mean, and Mighty Unclean. This is Tri-City Sports Now on 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities.